Las Vegas is often described as expensive, but still worth it. That phrase has become common, almost automatic. It appears in travel videos, holiday vlogs, and personal reviews, especially during peak seasons like Christmas. The cost is acknowledged briefly, then dismissed, as if high prices are no longer something to question. But this conversation rarely goes any deeper. It rarely asks who is actually being represented when we say something is worth the price. It rarely examines who is quietly excluded, who is adapting through debt, and who is no longer part of the picture at all. This is not a story about one trip, one holiday, or one city. It is a story about how rising costs are being normalized, how emotional language is used to justify financial pressure, and how an entire economic reality is being reframed as personal choice. Las Vegas, in this context, becomes more than a destination. It becomes a reflection of modern America, an economy where prices rise faster than stability, where reassurance is sold as experience, and where saying worth it often means something far more complicated than it sounds. This documentary breaks down that narrative piece by piece to understand what is really being sold, who it is built for, and what it reveals about the state of American life today. The phrase sounds simple, almost harmless, worth the price. It appears in headlines, thumbnails, and travel videos like this one, repeated as if it explains everything. Christmas in Las Vegas was expensive, yes, but according to those who went, it was worth it. The problem is that this phrase is almost never followed by the most important question, worth it for who? When people say a trip to Las Vegas was worth the price, they are rarely talking about price in absolute terms. They are talking about price relative to their own financial position. For some visitors, the cost is absorbed by savings that were already set aside for leisure. For others, it is charged to credit cards with the assumption that the consequences can be dealt with later. And for a smaller group, the expense is softened by year-end bonuses, stock gains, or flexible income that most Americans do not have. But this perspective is quietly presented as universal, even though it is not. In reality, the median American household lives paycheck to paycheck. There is no excess travel fund waiting to be used. There is no buffer that makes a sudden surge in hotel prices or holiday airfare feel manageable. For this majority, the question is not whether Las Vegas during Christmas is worth the price. The question is whether going there is financially possible at all. This is where the phrase becomes misleading. Worth it implies a choice between value and cost. It suggests that the viewer is standing in the same position as the people in the video, weighing enjoyment against expense. But for millions of Americans, that choice never exists. The price alone already disqualifies them before value is even considered. When media frames Las Vegas as expensive but still worth it, it subtly shifts the baseline. High prices are treated as normal, even expected. The burden is placed on the individual viewer to decide whether they can keep up. If they cannot, the implication is not that the system is broken, but that they personally are falling behind. This framing matters because it hides the growing economic divide behind a friendly conversational phrase. It turns structural affordability problems into personal budgeting failures. It also erases an entire segment of society from the story. The people who are never counted because they are not in the footage, not in the hotels, and not in the comment section celebrating how amazing the experience was. So when a video confidently declares that Christmas in Las Vegas was worth the price, it is not describing a shared reality. It is describing a narrow one, a reality accessible only to those who still have financial breathing room in an economy where most people no longer do. For decades, Las Vegas was marketed as a mass destination, a place where anyone could come, escape routine, and feel part of something bigger. It did not matter if you were middle class, working class, or somewhere in between. Vegas was designed to feel accessible. You might lose money at the tables, but getting into the city itself was never meant to feel exclusive. That reality no longer exists. Modern Las Vegas is not simply more expensive than it used to be. It has been structurally redesigned to function as a financial filter. Every major cost layer is calibrated not just to generate revenue, but to quietly decide who belongs and who does not. Hotel prices are the first gate. Base rates alone are enough to discourage lower income visitors, but the real mechanism is inconsistency. Prices fluctuate aggressively, making it impossible for budget travelers to plan with certainty. What once felt like a spontaneous getaway now requires financial flexibility that many Americans no longer have. Then come resort fees. These are not optional, and they are rarely emphasized up front. Resort fees act as a second filter, targeting the middle class directly. Even visitors who believe they found a reasonable deal are confronted with unavoidable add-ons that push total costs far beyond expectations. The message is subtle but clear. Affordability here is conditional. Food pricing completes the process. Meals that were once casual and inexpensive are now priced as luxury experiences by default. Basic dining options are inflated not because of quality, but because of location. Eating becomes another checkpoint, eliminating nearly everyone except those who can spend without hesitation. This is why it is misleading to say Vegas is expensive because it is busy. Crowds do not explain this pricing structure. Design does. Vegas is not reacting to demand, it is shaping it. High prices are not a side effect, they are the strategy. By filtering visitors economically, Las Vegas ensures a specific type of guest dominates the space. One who spends freely, tolerates inconvenience, and rarely questions the system itself. The city is no longer trying to welcome everyone, it is trying to curate who is allowed to stay. What looks like luxury on the surface is underneath exclusion by design, and that shift has changed Las Vegas from a destination into a test, not of desire, but of financial survival. Christmas in Las Vegas is often framed as a special experience. Lights are brighter, decorations are grander, and the city presents itself as festive and alive. But beneath that surface, Christmas in Vegas is not primarily about celebration. It is about timing. Specifically, it is the most efficient moment of the year to extract money from visitors. The holiday season creates a unique psychological condition. People arrive already primed to spend. Christmas carries emotional weight, family expectations, nostalgia, and the idea that moments should feel memorable, regardless of cost. Las Vegas understands this deeply, and it builds its pricing systems around that emotional vulnerability. Dynamic pricing becomes aggressive during this period. Hotel rates surge not because rooms are scarce, but because demand is predictable and emotionally charged. Visitors are not just booking a place to sleep, they are buying the feeling of being somewhere meaningful during the holidays. The price reflects that emotional leverage, not the actual value of the room. Surge pricing extends beyond hotels. Restaurants enforce mandatory minimum spends. Shows bundle premium seating with limited time holiday framing. Even basic amenities are repackaged as seasonal experiences. Each layer is designed to ensure that once a visitor arrives, spending is no longer optional. Participation itself becomes the product. What is being sold is not Christmas joy, it is the memory of Christmas. Vegas does not offer warmth or tradition in the way people imagine it. It offers the illusion of a meaningful holiday moment, carefully priced to feel exclusive and rare. The higher the cost, the more valuable the experience is perceived to be. This is why Christmas in Las Vegas feels less like a celebration and more like a transaction. The city does not rely on generosity or goodwill during the holidays. It relies on emotional urgency. Nostalgia is converted into revenue, and sentiment becomes a premium feature. By the time visitors leave, many will still say it was worth it, not because the experience was affordable or sustainable, but because admitting otherwise would mean acknowledging how effectively their emotions were monetized. Media does not just report experiences, it shapes expectations. When videos frame Las Vegas as expensive but still worth the price, they are not simply sharing opinions, they are performing a social function that gradually resets what audiences consider normal. The repetition matters. Viewers are exposed again and again to the same phrasing. Yes, it's expensive, but it's worth it. Over time, this language stops sounding like a warning and starts sounding like a standard. The cost is acknowledged briefly, then dismissed, as if high prices are no longer something to question, only something to accept. This is how normalization works. Prices that would have caused outrage a decade ago are now presented casually. $30 cocktails are treated as part of the atmosphere. $60 parking is framed as inconvenient but unavoidable. $400 hotel rooms are described as a fair trade for the experience. None of these prices are defended directly. They are justified indirectly through repetition. The effect is subtle but powerful. When audiences repeatedly see others absorbing these costs without visible consequence, their internal sense of financial reason shifts. What once felt excessive begins to feel expected. The burden moves from the system to the individual. If you are uncomfortable with the price, the implication is that the experience simply isn't for you. This type of coverage rarely interrogates who benefits from this shift. It does not ask whether the prices reflect value or whether they are detached from economic reality. reality. Instead, it reframes acceptance as maturity. Complaining becomes a sign of being out of touch, while compliance is portrayed as understanding how the world works now. Over time, this lowers the collective standard of financial sanity. People become less likely to question sudden price increases because they have already been conditioned to rationalize them. The conversation moves away from affordability and toward personal tolerance. In this way, media narratives do more than describe Las Vegas. They help construct an environment where extreme pricing feels normal, resistance feels unreasonable, and the definition of what is worth it quietly drifts further away from the lived reality of most Americans. For a long time, Las Vegas depended on the American middle class. The city was built around them. Teachers, office workers, and families from the Midwest were not a side market, they were the market. These were people who planned months in advance, saved carefully, and came to Vegas not to spend recklessly, but to feel briefly unburdened. That visitor is quietly disappearing. What makes this shift difficult to notice is that Vegas still looks busy. Hotels appear full, restaurants are crowded, shows continue to sell out, but the composition of the crowd has changed. The absence is not visible in volume, it is visible in identity. Today's Las Vegas is increasingly dominated by high rollers, influencers, and convention elites. These groups move through the city differently. Their spending is either subsidized, sponsored, or detached from personal financial limits. For them, price sensitivity is minimal, and that changes how the city responds. What is missing are not budget travelers or tourists who were never financially stable to begin with. What is missing is the American middle class itself, the group that once formed the economic backbone of the country, and the emotional backbone of Las Vegas is being priced out without announcement. This disappearance has deeper implications than tourism trends. When middle-class visitors leave, they take with them predictability, they take loyalty, they take repeat visits that sustain the city through economic cycles. What replaces them is a more volatile audience, one that spends heavily but inconsistently, and whose presence depends on trends rather than tradition. The loss also changes the culture of the city. Vegas becomes less about shared experiences and more about performance, less about accessibility and more about status. The city stops reflecting the lives of ordinary Americans and begins catering almost exclusively to those who can afford to ignore economic pressure. In that sense, the disappearing middle-class visitor is not just a tourism issue, it is a warning signal. When a city built on mass participation can no longer sustain its core audience, the problem is not demand. The problem is who the system is designed to serve. When people say an experience was worth it, the assumption is that the cost was manageable, that the enjoyment matched the expense, and that the decision was made from a position of financial comfort. But in many cases, worth it does not mean affordability. It means emotional justification. For a growing number of Americans, calling something worth it has become a coping mechanism. It is a way to reduce anxiety after spending money they were not entirely comfortable spending. The phrase works like a shield. It reframes financial stress as personal reward. The justifications are familiar. It's only once a year. Christmas only comes once. I deserve this. These statements are not about value, they are about permission. They allow people to momentarily ignore the financial consequences by focusing on emotional relief. This mindset is especially powerful during the holidays. Stress is already high, expectations are already heavy, spending becomes a way to reclaim control, to feel normal, or to feel successful in a moment when the rest of life feels uncertain. The experience itself becomes secondary to what the spending represents. What rarely gets said out loud is what happens afterward. The credit card balance does not disappear. The higher interest does not pause out of respect for the memory. Financial pressure is not erased by enjoyment, it is simply delayed. In this context, worth it often translates to something more honest. I will deal with this later. The pain is postponed, not avoided. The satisfaction is immediate, but the cost is spread across months, quietly accumulating. This is not reckless behavior, it is adaptive behavior in an environment where people feel deprived of moments that feel meaningful. When stability is fragile, experiences become substitutes for security. Saying something was worth it becomes less about evaluation and more about survival, a way to emotionally justify choices made under economic pressure. Las Vegas pricing is built on an assumption that no longer holds. The system still behaves as if most Americans have discretionary income, extra money left after necessities are paid. That assumption shaped the city for decades, and for a long time it worked. But the economic reality of today no longer supports it. Across the country, fixed expenses have expanded. Rent has risen faster than wages. Grocery bills consume a larger share of monthly income. Healthcare costs remain unpredictable and unavoidable. Student loan payments have returned, re-entering household budgets that were already strained. These are not lifestyle choices, they are structural obligations. Yet Vegas pricing models continue as if none of this has changed. Leisure spending is treated as elastic, something people can stretch indefinitely without breaking. Hotel rates, entertainment packages, dining minimums, and resort fees all assume that visitors still have room to absorb additional costs. This disconnect creates friction. Visitors arrive expecting escape, but encounter a system that pressures them to spend as if financial stress does not exist. Every transaction assumes compliance. Every price assumes tolerance. The burden is not adjusted to reality. Reality is expected to adjust to the price. What makes this especially fragile is that discretionary income is not disappearing evenly. For a small segment of Americans, it still exists in abundance. For most, it has been compressed or erased entirely. By pricing exclusively for the former, Vegas narrows its audience and increases its dependence on a shrinking group. The industry's failure is not a lack of demand, it is a failure of alignment. Vegas has not recalibrated its expectations to match the economic lives of ordinary Americans. It continues to operate on a version of the country that no longer exists. As long as this assumption remains unchallenged, pricing will continue to feel detached, experiences will continue to feel exclusionary, and the gap between what Vegas offers and what Americans can realistically afford will only widen. There is a group of people almost never visible in videos celebrating Las Vegas experiences. They are not in the hotel tours, not in the restaurant reviews, and not in the background of luxury shots. Yet without them, Las Vegas would not function at all. Service workers, casino staff, hotel cleaners, gig workers. These are the people who keep the city running day and night. They check guests in, clean rooms, serve drinks, manage crowds, and absorb the pressure of constant demand. Their labor is embedded in every worth it experience that gets filmed and uploaded. What makes their absence striking is not just invisibility, but contradiction. These workers exist inside the same city that is being marketed as desirable and exciting, yet they are economically excluded from participating in it. They work in Vegas, but they cannot afford Vegas. For many of them, the prices that visitors debate casually are completely out of reach. A single night in a strip hotel can represent a significant portion of monthly income. Dining in the venues they serve is not a lifestyle choice. It is an impossibility. The city they maintain is priced as if they do not exist. This creates a quiet imbalance. The experiences being celebrated are built on the labor of people who are systematically removed from the narrative. Their financial reality does not fit the image, so it is left out. Videos focus on enjoyment, while the conditions that make that enjoyment possible remain unseen. The irony is difficult to ignore. The people who make Las Vegas feel alive are the same people pushed to the margins by its pricing structure. They sustain the illusion, but are excluded from its rewards. And as long as they remain invisible in the story, the full cost of the experience remains unacknowledged. Las Vegas today is no longer primarily about winning or losing. That narrative belonged to an earlier era when risk was visible and outcomes were clear. The modern version of Vegas sells something far more abstract and far more powerful: reassurance. The message is subtle but persistent. If you can still afford to come here, then your life must still be intact. If you can book the hotel, sit at the restaurant, and walk the strip during the holidays, then you must be doing fine. The trip itself becomes proof of stability. For many visitors, this illusion matters more than the experience itself. Beneath the lights and performances, there is anxiety. Finances feel fragile. Savings are thinner than they should be. The future feels uncertain, shaped by rising costs and shrinking margins. In that context, being able to participate in a visible, expensive experience becomes a way to quiet doubt. Vegas functions as a stage for this reassurance. It allows people to perform normalcy at a time when normalcy feels increasingly out of reach. Spending is no longer just about enjoyment. It becomes symbolic. It says to oneself and to others that things are still under control. This is why Vegas operates less as pure entertainment and more as emotional escape. The city absorbs economic fear and converts it into temporary relief. The lights distract, the environment reassures. For a brief moment, financial stress is suspended, even if nothing has actually changed. The danger of this illusion is not the experience itself, but what it delays. When reassurance replaces reflection, underlying instability goes unexamined. Vegas offers comfort without resolution. It allows people to feel okay without addressing why they no longer feel secure in the first place. In that sense, Vegas is no longer selling fantasy or chance. It is selling emotional permission, the permission to believe, just for a weekend, that everything is still fine. In economic history, certain phrases tend to appear at very specific moments, not during stability and not after collapse, but in the space just before systems begin to break. Worth the price is one of those phrases. It surfaces when prices stop making sense, but still need to be defended. When costs rise faster than value, language steps in to close the gap. People stop explaining why something is affordable and start insisting that it is justified. The shift is subtle, but significant. At this stage, consumers are no longer evaluating experiences objectively. They are rationalizing discomfort. Saying something was worth the price becomes a way to protect oneself from the realization that the cost was excessive. Pain is reframed as meaning. Loss is reframed as maturity. Doubt is replaced with acceptance. This is how denial becomes collective. Individuals repeat the same phrase, not because it reflects reality, but because it offers emotional closure. The system benefits from this repetition. As long as people continue to justify, prices do not need to correct, they only need to persist. For Las Vegas, this narrative is especially dangerous. The city depends on trust as much as it depends on spending. Trust that the experience has value. Trust that participation is not self-destructive. Trust that the system is still aligned with the lives of ordinary Americans. If Vegas continues to rely on the language of justification instead of confronting affordability, the consequences will extend beyond tourism numbers. What will erode is public confidence. When enough people realize that worth the price was a defense mechanism rather than a truth, the correction will not be gradual. At that point, the loss will not just be visitors, it will be belief. And once belief collapses, no amount of lighting, branding, or narrative can replace it.